You're listening to author Jason Lee Willis read The Summerbird. This is Part 2, Cassie Campbell. Chapter 38, A Fresh Start, Split Rock, Minnesota, December 24th, 1997. Cassie Campbell snapped her head from the window to face her father. "Why are you stopping?" she asked from the passenger seat of the U-Haul. "The hill looks a little slick going down and going up," Jay Campbell explained. "After that stretch near Rockford, I want to be careful. I'm half tempted to let you get out." Cassie saw the danger. The snowplows had left a smooth, snow-crusted base 20 yards on both sides of the bridge. With the big metal bridge and a river, slipping and sliding could mean disaster. "Okay, here goes nothing," he said. Instead of creeping up to the bridge, Jay Campbell floored the big engine in the U-Haul, and the two went down the hill like a toboggan. "Dad!" Jay worked the steering wheel while biting onto his bottom lip. Cassie could feel the front wheels fishtailing, but her dad kept picking up speed. The U-Haul bounced 3 times as it crossed the bridge platform, and moments after, Cassie understood why her father drove like a maniac. The western hill, while not so steep, was twice as long, and all the momentum of the moving van slowed despite her father almost standing on the accelerator. "Come on, girl, you can do it," Jay muttered. When the U-Haul slowed to less than 10 miles per hour, its spinning wheels found a little more secure grip along the edge of the road and crawled its way to the Forsberg driveway. Cassie barely had time to relax when she saw a curious sight. 4 big 4x4 trucks parked in the front of Grandma Edna's house, Cassie's new home. A small army of rednecks waited in the driveway with hands stuffed down their front coat pockets. Leading the pack, Uncle Brian stepped forward as soon as the truck stopped. "What's all this?" "A friendly neighborhood welcome," Uncle Brian announced. "You two have been on the road for almost 2 days, so Ma will get you some late lunch and we'll get started on unpacking." Cassie sheepishly climbed out and walked around the nose of the U-Haul, where the throngs of locals waited to introduce themselves. After Uncle Brian, the men all formed a line. "I'm Chuck Looning, District 4 State Congressman." "The former mayor, right?" Jay asked. Her dad took all her introductions, and she only had to shake each firm hand. Duncan McPherson was followed by his sons Daniel and Clay, who had vibrant green hair sticking out from his stocking cap. Garrett Johnson came next and slipped the phrase "little lady" into his introduction. A towering figure named Gary followed, insisting he be called Big Mac. A strikingly handsome man with dark complexion was next. Cassie assumed he was Native American. Ben Labiche. "He's also a professor," Uncle Brian said to Labiche and gestured to Jay. "Are you?" Professor Labiche asked. "Where do you teach?" "It's just an old nickname," Jay admitted. "I dropped out of college to enlist." The final handshake came from Ansel Nielsen, who had a scar along his bearded jawline. "I believe we're second cousins," he told Cassie. She just smiled and nodded and then ran to the front door where Grandma Edna waited for a hug. "Now this feels like home again." Cassie disappeared into Edna's warm embrace and would have stayed there if not for a sudden appearance of the green-haired boy. "Where do you want this?" he asked. Cassie had labeled everything, so she released her embrace and approached the box. "Upstairs bedroom, the one with the sliding glass doorway on the balcony. That's my new room." Second cousin Ansel showed up next. "Just set them down here, and I'll have the green-haired kid bring them to the room." "Right room," Cassie decided. "He likes to be called Clay," Ansel said. A curious way to put it. Is that not his real name? When Clay came down the stairs, she studied him closer and noticed how he didn't look her in the eyes when she told him where to bring the next box. Cassie managed to eat lunch and also direct traffic. With each encounter with Clay and the others, she slowly began to piece together who they were and what their personalities were like and why they were there. Her second cousin Ansel was more than just a blood relative. Ansel's father served in Vietnam with both Uncle Brian and her dad. Big Mac was a retired priest who also knew Uncle Brian from his time in Vietnam, where he'd served as an army chaplain. The McPhersons were neighbors, so she learned from Duncan, who took a seat after his 3rd trip. He'd been ill recently, but his son Daniel worked twice as fast as the others. Surprisingly, the eccentric Clay also belonged to Duncan, making him both neighbor and classmate at Split Rock High School. Garrett Johnson, a local electrician and farmer, operated the truck with the snowplow attachment. and made it part of his daily routine to check in with Edna, which is why she doted on him the most with extra cookies after lunch. Neither Congressman Chuck nor Professor Labiche had an obvious personal connection, which intrigued Cassie a bit as she tried to figure out the leverage Uncle Brian used for the free labor on Christmas Eve afternoon. The more she listened to the two, the more she realized they were most comfortable talking politics. By the time the truck was empty, Edna had another offering of treats for the men, which she insisted on being taken. After she pushed them into seconds, all the men began to depart. Chuck Looning set off for Christmas Eve at his son's house. Professor Labiche, who normally lived in Ashland, Wisconsin, had business at the Mesquite Band of Ojibwe Reservation, which gave Cassie her answer about his racial background. The McPhersons were all attending a Christmas Mass at St. Marie's Catholic Church later that evening, so they all had to shower and dress up. Garrett Johnson also had plans with his young family, and it sounded as if he'd be joining Chuck for a larger gathering on Christmas Day. By the time Edna was putting places onto the dining room table, a few still remained: Uncle Brian, Big Mac, and Ansel Nielsen. For the first time since her mother's death, Cassie didn't feel frozen inside. She mostly soaked it in, but offered insights into her fears about finishing at a new school. The men laughed and teased around the table, even if it was small talk about football and hunting. All the fun ended when Grandma Edna finally sat down. "Did you tell Cassie about the Chauvin girl who went missing?" "Ma," Uncle Brian glared across the table. "What?" "It's been in the news for 2 months now. She's going to be going to school with those hoodlums in 2 weeks. She should know what's going on." "It's okay," Cassie said. "I read about it already." "Made the news in Baltimore?" "No, Grandma, online. You can get news on your computer now. It sends information through the phone lines." "You don't say," Edna said, but then turned her attention to her son. "So have your detectives found any new leads? Do they think it was a runaway, or do they suspect foul play?" "Ma, you know the rules." "Who am I going to tell?" "Half of Hiawatha County. Although now you and Cassie are going to be duking it out for control of the phone line." She's still considered missing, huh?" Cassie prompted. It humored her that Edna would bring up such a morose topic at the table, but personally, she wanted to talk about it. Uncle Brian rolled his eyes as Grandma Edna answered. "She was at a party up at Lyons State Park before she vanished, so more likely than not, one of those kids had a hand in it." "Did you use cadaver dogs?" Cassie asked. Uncle Brian sighed loudly. "It's nothing to get defensive about," Grandma Edna insisted. "Cassandra deserves to know the possible dangers of going to parties." "She's a hoot. No filters with her." "Oh, I don't drink, Grandma." "Oh, that's what they all say, until one day a new face pops up on the nightly news." Big Mac swept in to save the conversation, and immediately became obvious how his years as a priest left him versed in the art of conversation. He gently directed Grandma Edna away from the topic of Summer Chauvin and instead focused on Jay's new job at the Department of Natural Resources. For the first time in months, her dad seemed enthused. After years of working the urban river flowing into the Chesapeake Bay, he transferred to work the rural river systems of the Upper Mississippi and Crow Wing River systems. Listening to him describe his duties to Ansel and Gary made cutting ties with Baltimore worth it for her. "Cassie is going to be doing some job shadowing with Brian at the Sheriff's Department," Jay added after he endured the spotlight for a few moments. "Do you have an interest in law enforcement?" Ansel asked. "I want to join the FBI or CIA," she boasted. "She's got a scholarship to Notre Dame," her dad bragged. "Notre Dame?" Big Mac reacted positively. "Well done." "A little experience in the field is worth more than experience in the classroom," Uncle Brian offered. "That's what I said to him." Cassie remembered the final details of the big move to Minnesota. It was like pulling teeth, but he relented when she offered her computer skills. "Oh, I know, but if I want a career, I want to secure my degree first. From there, I'll have to earn everything else." "She's not going to do ride-alongs to a crack house, is she?" Ansel asked. The table chuckled. "No, she's not going to leave the basement in St. John. Since she's such a whiz with computers, she's going to do a little apprenticeship with Dan Eklund in the records department. Even though the computers are the future of law enforcement, it's going to be good to see how we did things back in the day. Maybe she'll find out what happened to the Chauvin girl. Grandma Edna finished and rose to begin to clearing the table. Chapter 39. Forging a Compact. Split Rock, Minnesota, December 29th, 1997. It took Cassie a moment to locate the source of the voice. As soon as she transitioned from dream to reality, she knew it wasn't her old bedroom in Baltimore. In the darkness, she could see the slanted walls of her new ceiling. Her lungs took in such cold air that she could see her breath in the red light created by an alarm clock. Even though her curtains were closed, no residual light crept in from the sides. The darkness of Lake Manitou was complete. Are you there? She reached out her hand into the darkness, but the layout of her bedroom had changed from her mental map of her old bedroom, and when she couldn't find the lamp, her heart panicked. Her fingers found the knob, and protective light filled the room. Just you. The only face in sight was her childhood Barbie doll, which now rested on the dresser with the black raven feather across her lap. She kept an eye on it for a moment before turning to face the rest of the room. I helped him by getting him here to Minnesota. Now what about the willow? No ghosts, no living shadows. Cassie sighed, almost disappointed, and got ready for her day. When she came downstairs, she saw her father lacing his boots on a chair near the front door. Hey, the working girl. Please, you make it sound like I'm a prostitute or something, she shivered. Are we inside of the Arctic Circle? It's a bit dark, isn't it? You might not see the sun today. It'll be cold, but at least I'll see the sun out in the field. You're going to be working out on the ice today? Oh, probably not. I'll probably be stuck in an office for the first few days. He stood up and slid on a heavy parka. Have fun with Uncle Brian, he said, and kissed her on the head. Don't be a pest. After fueling up on another masterpiece breakfast from Grandma Edna, Cassie hopped in Uncle Brian's Hiawatha County Sheriff's Department SUV, and away they went. Got everything unpacked, he asked, as they began their trek over to the county seat of St. John. I pretty much streamlined everything down to a dorm room level, she said, so it didn't take me long to get things set up. That's smart. How was church yesterday? Big Mac sat with us. He seems to be too much of a hippie to ever have been a priest. Yeah, he's a bit burnt out right now. Being a priest was a tough gig. And Dad watched football afterwards. Even though Big Mac didn't experience what your dad and I experienced, he saw what we experienced, which is why we don't need to talk about it. Got it. No talk about Summer Chauvin or Vietnam, Cassie teased. She left it at that and even offered a smug smile when he glanced over at her. I'm sure I'll catch up on all the gossip and theories when school resumes next week. This one hit the mark, and she watched his scowl grow and his grip on the steering wheel tighten. Finally, he relaxed and cleared his throat. If you look out your window, you can see Ansel Nielsen's mansion. Those lights you see are his estate. His stepdad left him a fortune. Ansel likes to ask questions too. If you want gossip and theories, you should go talk to him. But let me warn you about life in a small town. Everybody knows everybody's business, and reputations are taken seriously. Keep your mouth shut for 5 months and get your degree. His frankness disarmed her a bit. I was just teasing, she clarified. I'm not obsessed with it like Grandma Edna. I promise I'll be professional. Professional, huh? Absolutely. Well, I don't even talk to Dan Eklund about open investigations, so until you work your way up the ladder to detective, the same thing I told Ma applies to you. I'll drop it. Cassie raised her hands in mock surrender. Hiawatha County Courthouse looked like it belonged in To Kill a Mockingbird. The 3-story brick building had a 3-foot rock wall separating the great yard from the sidewalks that led to the front doors. Huge trees stood sentry around the yard, but it wasn't until Uncle Brian pulled her on the block that she saw the sheriff's department. Built of newer brick on the rear of the older structure, she spotted a fenced yard that identified the small county jail. Opposite of Residential Street, the rear block had several deputy vehicles parked in front of a closed dual garage. A parking lot of 40 stalls held only a few civilian vehicles, one of which likely belongs to Dan Eklund. Uncle Brian pulled into one of the angled stalls along the street and walked her to a modest entrance with a single glass door. "Mia, this is Cassie," he said to the woman behind the desk as they entered. "I've heard so much about you," Mia began, and in a frenzy of words, Mia Donaldson swept her away from Uncle Brian and began a tour of the department. After 60 feet of introductions at various offices, Cassie saw the architecture transition to the old building, and after a series of stairs, she found herself in the old basement. There, Mia introduced her to Charlene Dunn, Lisa Mix, Delora Sampson, and Jessica Lafreniere, who were all clerks in the records department who sat together in a U-shaped counter with computers. Her supervisor, Dan Eklund, had an office and title of evidence specialist. With a knock on his door, the tour ended. Both Eklund and the facility disappointed her a bit. Dan Eklund wore a sweater vest and slacks. Unlike her alpha male uncle, Eklund dressed, spoke, and carried himself like a true nerd. If she had to guess, she assumed he was in his 40s because of the bald spot in his thin blonde hair and the protruding gut covered by the vest. But his cheeks were rosy and full, a sign he might be younger than he looked. As he nervously showcased his office contents, Cassie couldn't help but notice how he'd play with his thin mustache by either touching it with the tip of his tongue or by capturing stray strands with his lips. She adored him. "And this is my brand new compact with an MXX printer processor," he finished. "It was approved the same day I found out I'd taken an apprentice, so I think I have you to thank for that." "Pentium," she noted on the stickers and still affixed to the tower. "It's the fastest thing in the building, which is important when you're trying to process data and evidence," he smiled. "Now, follow me and I'll show you the project you're helping me with." Dan fumbled with his keys as they walked down a dimly lit basement hallway. He unlocked the door. Cassie saw a massive room with dozens of rows, the evidence and document room. "I'm convinced, Sheriff Forsberg, that computers are the future of investigations, so we've been tasked with converting all the paper records to computer files. I'll be managing all the recent cases, but our goal is to go backwards in time." Cool. That's one way to learn about Mom's hometown. He took 4 paces into the room and stopped. 1967. That's how far back I managed to get. The scanner and the digital camera are going to be your primary tools. Once you finish digitizing a case file, then I'll help you load it into our system. Cassie found herself politely nodding at the mundane duty. With a glance, she noticed decades of case files further back on the racks. "Did you have dreams of chasing bad guys?" Eklund teased. Cassie shrugged. "Evidence is the key to any conviction," Eklund remarked. "Whether FBI, CRA, or BCA, if you understand the basics of evidence and evidence collection, you'll be a more efficient officer of the law." "So this laptop and scanner are mine," Cassie said, noting a card table set up just inside the door. "It has a new iOmega Jazz drive, so once you finish with the file, you can bring the disk down to my office and we'll plug it into the system." "Great," Cassie offered as politely as her disappointment allowed. Let's get started." Although her first step into law enforcement was a baby step, she knew bigger and better things waited for her just around the bend. Chapter 40, Old Lang Syne. December 31st, 1997. The ghost of Julia Forsberg stood in the doorway. "Wow," Carson blurted as he opened the door. Julia had been homecoming royalty when he was a horny middle school boy, and her regal beauty imprinted on his subconscious for the rest of his life. Seeing her daughter standing in the doorway decades later left him mostly speechless. While she had her father's ebony hair, her alabaster face had a few dark freckles dotting her cheeks, as well as Julia's kind, wide eyes. "If you don't look like your mother." "I think someone has started the party early," Jay Campbell said from behind her. ending the awkward moment. Cassie took it in stride and accepted Carson's extended hand. Carson Looning, he greeted. Welcome. She returned the handshake, nodded, and slipped by him into the entryway. The party's to the left, he said, letting the conversation mercifully end. Even though Carson served as host, the party belonged to others. Carson's mother and father still live modestly in the old house down by the Crow Wing River, but Chuck often used the Fisher Mansion to host his constituents. His father brought a crowd of business owners and politicians, while his mother, the queen of Split Rock social circles, invited her pack of friends as well as her brother Carl Redding, a former Minnesota Viking defensive lineman who'd come up from the Twin Cities. Their crowd of 60-somethings packed the dining hall of the mansion. Balancing the generations, Lacey Morrison invited a dozen of her friends, still in their 20s, who gathered in the big kitchen. For his part, Carson invited the members of the Asante Lodge, but these folks were introduced to the other groups mostly by their titles: the current sheriff, the young philanthropist, a semi-retired local priest, a farmer, an MBO tribal chairman, a Native American studies professor, and a hydrologist recently hired by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. After another hour of greeting the guests, Carson left the entryway and lingered in the hall between the two wings of the building. Coming from the right, Father Gary walked back with a few of his father's friends. While his office was securely locked up, the rest of the house was open to the public, and his great-grandfather Albert's automobile collection remained one of the property's best exhibits. "Do I need to put Wally to bed soon?" Carson teased while Father Gary was in earshot. "Oh, he's having a grand old time talking about those cars," Father Gary replied. The throng made small talk about vehicles, including Carson's customized car that allowed him to drive with levers instead of pedals, before heading back to the main part of the house to refill their drinks. Father Gary and company had not even returned to the dining room when another group passed by them in the hall. This one was led by Sheriff Forsberg and included Jay Campbell. "Lacey's looking for you," Forsberg said as the group passed him. "Did I do something wrong?" Carson headed toward the kitchen. Just before reaching the loud dining hall, he caught a strange sight out of the corner of his eye. Ansel Nielsen and Cassie Campbell sitting on the stairs to the observatory. Both paused their conversation and returned his glance. "Having a good time?" Carson asked. "It's a nice party, but I think I'm the youngest one here," Cassie answered. "Ansel and I were just talking about our parents." "Ah, I see. Feel free to check out the telescopes," Carson offered before continuing. At first, this scene felt creepy as hell. Ansel was a decade older than her, and given their proximity to the stairs, the situation seemed slightly predatory. Then Carson remembered the Nielsens and Forsbergs were cousins. Finally, he understood the immediate bond. Both had lost parents. From everything Lacey had told him about their previous relationship with Ansel, Carson knew Ansel's almost aversion to intimacy. So Carson decided it must have been an earnest conversation. He kept his head down as they went through the hall where his parents entertained their guest. Once he passed into the kitchen and living room, he spotted Lacey. She hopped off a bar stool and walked over. "Do you have a moment to talk?" "Sure, what's up?" "In private?" "Can't this wait?" Carson said in reference to the gathering. "You promised me the other day we'd find some time to talk," Lacey muttered before finishing off her wine cooler. Visualizing a very drunk Lacey rambling about prophecies in another 2 hours in front of the crowd. Right, let's go talk in the greenhouse. Hester sat with a book in the doorway that led to the kitchen and residential area of the house. Down the hall and up the stairs, Willow slept in her bedroom while Hester kept guests out of that part of the house. "Excuse us," he said to Hester. "We just need a quiet place to talk." "Oh, don't mind me," she said and returned to her book. The faux greenhouse hallway was 20 degrees cooler than the air in the party. "Lay it on me," Carson said. "I'm worried about Cassie Campbell." "Cassie? She just got here." "Because she's taken an interest in Ansel?" What? No, I mean, what? Why did you say that? Oh shit, wrong direction. Nothing. I just saw them talking, and this isn't a jealousy thing. Why am I the only one worried about the big picture? Before Mrs. Crane's stories became incoherent, she was setting up Becca as the main character. Becca? Cassie and Becca are the same characters, I think. It's not a perfect fit, but I'm pretty sure they are the same person Mrs. Crane dreamed about. I think she's important, but everyone is shrugging off the fact that the Campbells moved here. We need to reach out and... Stop. Look what happened after you spoke to Summer Chauvin. Lacey's face immediately changed to hurt, and he battled guilt. Lacey, I meant, how could you even say that? I was the only one trying to help her. I was the only one trying to stop her from dying. So Levi is magically abducted by a sinister secret society, but Summer's buried in the pines? Lacey looked ready to fight. When her car turns up, then you'll know I'm right. Blue 1980 Mercury Capri. His agitation grew. But you told Sheriff Forsberg her missing car would be found at the junkyard in Brainerd. There was no trace, was there? Mark and Molly are getting a divorce. That detail was correct. Carson's heart trembled thinking of Molly being alone at such a time. Then he realized how Lacey would know such a thing. Did you speak with Molly? No, she told my mom about it. With the investigation prying into their private lives, things fell apart for them. With no sign of foul play, the Chauvins had to lean into the runaway idea, which of course opened up Mark as a possible monster that drove away his daughter. Mark's an asshole, but he's not a child molester. Carson had heard the rumors too, but pushed them away when he thought of Penny growing up in that house. Oh, I know what you think of Mark, but the big picture is that Summer has likely been murdered. So the little details won't really matter. Even if Mrs. Crane dreamed it accurately, she was under no obligation to write things down accurately. Her dreams inspired her fiction, but she didn't even know we'd be using them to figure stuff out. But here's what I do know. Summer vanishes, and Cassie Campbell shows up, like clockwork. I'm not seeing your point. Why did you invite them? Cassie and her father? Geez, Lacey, half of Lake Manitou is here tonight. You know what I mean. You guys exclude me from the Asante Club, but she suddenly shows up and suddenly everyone wants to take her under their wing. Is this a Morrison thing? She thinks we don't trust her because of her family ties to Eos. Ansel aimed for distraction instead. I forgot to tell you how great you look tonight. Stop your flattery. That's over. Of course it is. Underneath all the crazy talk, she'd pulled him aside to tell him Molly Chauvin was about to be available. So why are you worried about Cassie? Don't let that girl get hurt. I don't know what Ansel's talking to her about, but I think you were right about leaving those kids alone until after graduation. The less she knows about our mess, the better. I don't want it to ruin her life like it ruined mine. Hey, your life wasn't ruined. Willow's a great kid, and you're the glue that keeps us all together. Thanks. Even if you are crazy glue, he said with a dimpled smile. She smacked his shoulder twice, a good sign. Chuckles followed, and she took a step back towards the party. I'll speak with Ansel and the others about giving Cassie some space. They're nervous, Lacey. We don't think you're crazy, but it's easier to look the other way sometimes than face reality. And what is this reality? We're all puppets, and you're the only one wanting to be talking about the strings. Chapter 41, Diligence, Mesike Band of Ojibwe, January 5th, 1998. Ansel did not accept the invitation to sit at the meeting as a guest and instead waited in the hall on an old wooden church pew. Inside, he could hear calm voices discussing governmental matters as they proceeded through the agenda. He grew impatient and rose to pace around the building. A century earlier, the Society of Jesus invested in the Turtle Island Jesuit School as a humanitarian mission. At the time, the reservation system was in crisis. For decades, private and government-run boarding schools had been systematically modernizing Native American youth, but a new policy went even farther by trying to dissolve the communities by allowing private ownership and private sale. Father Gene Guerin, a secret agent of the periphery, convinced the Jesuits to throw a life preserver to the community in Hiawatha County. Now meeting in one of those buildings, Ansel could hear conversations drifting out to him in the hallway. Once again, the reservation was in crisis. When Gene Guerin arrived for his mission, nefarious agents of EOS had forced most plots of the MBO reservation to be sold. Only the Weber and Thunderface families remained on the eastern bank of the Blue Knife River. Adam Thunderface shrewdly leased his land to Triton Corporation, a shell company for EOS, for the span of 100 years. When Lillian McGeese's adult family members were killed, Gene Guerin sought to protect them from the repercussions with another lease agreement. He became ward to the children, who later received their 2 plots upon reaching adulthood. The 3rd plot was leased to the Society of Jesus for 100 years. Now, the tribal council discussed what to do with the school property. Ansel looked out of the big windows to a mostly abandoned property. Father Gene's dream of creating a harbor in the storm never took root. Currently, only 30 students attended the heavily subsidized private school, leaving student dorms, academic halls, and a library unused. Beyond the school, Lily Weber's lot became a small Anishinaabe community of barely 100 residents. Even farther south, McGeese's old lot and the Thunderface lot had become the subject of legal disputes, making the day's meeting important. If the land is acquired by Eos or Vendita, the world will end in the sound of bulldozers. The double doors opened, and a crowd of about 20 people dispersed. Ansel stayed where he was and let his friends come to him for the updates. Leonard White Elk, whose Chevril ancestors once owned lots upriver, still towered over a crowd despite his age. With him, Professor Ben Labiche, who'd come from British Columbia with his Uncle Leonard, stuffed documents into a satchel. Both men had roots to the original reservation, but it was Cameron Guerin, who shuffled beside Leonard, who'd been the focus of the meeting. "How you feeling, Cameron?" Ansel asked once they joined him. "My head hurts." His honest answer prompted chuckles from the others. "How'd it go, gentlemen?" "We're in trouble," Labiche admitted. "They're not saying it yet, but all the talk centered around a dream of a casino, which is a distraction, of course." "The casino is a lie?" Cameron asked. "It's not a lie, Cameron. It's a bit of a shell game. Obviously, the old McGeese plot is where they want to build the casino, which is why they're trying to secure new land north of the reservation as some sort of collateral trade. With the school, they're trying to weasel that away with the help of the state of Minnesota, with the contingency that it become a historical site. A bit of splash of culture to balance the addition of a casino, Ansel assessed. What makes you think that's the play? If I didn't know better, I'd say they're going to make a push to close the school. The petty allegations and accusations are now on record. Financial mismanagement is one thing, but if this becomes a public scandal, then closing the school would open the door for repurposing the facility. "Ah, I see," Ansel began. "But the Catholic Church is running the school, so go ahead and let them get sued. What I'm interested in is how did things go regarding Cameron's legal claim to the lot?" "The matter is not clear with the United States government. They recognize him as the legal title holder for the school property, but the tribal council sent it to committee, and who knows how long it'll take before any of that is resolved. The worst thing that could happen now is that the residents vote to bulldoze their homes to build the casino. Cameron Guerin legally owns the northern and southern lots, but since Lily gave her middle plot to the residents of the MBO reservation, that's the only place the casino could happen. Control of the property is out of our control. What do you think, Leonard?" "I think you and I need to talk." Why does this suddenly feel like I'm in trouble? "I'll bring Cameron home," Professor Labiche offered. Leonard reached into his coat pocket and produced an old pipe. He packed it with tobacco, lit it, and then said, "Let's walk." Ansel followed the large man the rest of the way down the hallway and then out the double doors. Leonard stopped outside of the side door, with a field of white between them and the main road through the school. Beyond the road, the tangled branches of the Blue Knife River created a dark backdrop. Ansel remained wary, knowing how the Tok'pai loved to lurk around the cave and McGeesy's cabin. Leonard also seemed alert, and both men walked in silence. Leonard cleared his throat. "I don't remember the exact wording. The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty." Ansel didn't know how to respond. "Is that an Anishinaabe saying?" "The Bible, Proverbs. Those folks in there are in a big rush to make change. Most of them do it for the best intentions." "The path to hell is lined with good intentions," Ansel countered. "Like the old boarding schools," Leonard agreed, and leaned slightly against the brick of the building. "I'm not trying to be hasty. I try to measure my words." "I like that about you," Ansel added, and realized he interrupted when Leonard glanced at him. "Sorry, go on." "My mother believed Lily Weber and Jean Guerin acted with the best intentions, but they were in such a rush that they didn't take time to be diligent." This time, Ansel waited as Leonard turned to face the distance, taking a deep inhalation before steadily breathing it out. "I cannot criticize the Guerins for their hasty ways and with hasty plans, since I cannot see how the world would have been shaped. All I can see is what is before me. The Lord has not forsaken his children, so I will continue to praise him and act as his servant. But I need your help." "Absolutely," Ansel agreed enthusiastically. "What do you need?" Leonard's somber expression made Ansel worry about what was coming next. "The Lord blessed you with gifts, but he did not grant you diligence. The Lord answered my prayers almost 12 years ago, but I've pondered the meaning of this gift almost every day since. The events happening here at the reservation are about to force my hand to action, and when that day ultimately comes, I want to be prepared." "Diligence," Ansel repeated solemnly. "Our enemies were not prepared, and I believe that is how Levi McPherson managed to trick them and put us on a path to victory. He caught them off guard, and only now are they beginning to understand how he foiled their plans." Talk of Levi disarmed Ansel. "Care to explain?" Leonard nodded. "This is what we know about the prophecy from the tales. A water drum, the ironwood scrolls, a fire handler, a sacred shell, an evil water spirit, a song, and a sacred fire that must be lit. Ben has dedicated his life to understanding the history of the Anishinaabe people, from his home all the way back to the shores of the Atlantic. Yet he can only view the prophecy from his perspective. I grew up as a Christian, and I am blinded by my own perspective on how to see these items. But you only see what is in front of you. You know what is true, but you don't limit your understanding by what you've read or what you've been taught." Leonard paused and held his gaze. "I need your help." "Of course, absolutely. Whatever you need, but I'm still not sure what you're talking about." "What part of the prophecy is unknown?" "Oh, brother," Ansel muttered as he shifted his mind away from Levi, "I suppose the most obvious answer is the Philosopher's Stone?" Leonard shook his head. "We know it has been hidden, and we know it is very real. True, even though I've never seen it. So what is unknown? We believe the water drum is the Philosopher's Stone, that Lily was one of these 3 fire handlers, that the Wintermaker was the evil spirit trapped in water. And because of Levi, he is what is unknown. Yet we know he exists," Leonard corrected. On multiple occasions, our enemies were hasty to fulfill the prophecy, yet they did not know the song of the Manitou that would light the sacred fire. Levi knew the prophecy had not aligned. Sure, we talked about this with Forsberg years ago. Levi's death was staged, but if you want to talk about unknowns, we have no idea what he did, why he did it, or where he took the Philosopher's Stone. I mean, I take it you believe he left the Philosopher's Stone somewhere on the reservation. Is that why you're nervous about these legal issues? Leonard hesitated and then shrugged. I'm focused on matters that will likely happen after I am dead and gone. If I am right, and Levi gave our enemies key pieces to the prophecy, knowing they'd fail, he knew what was missing. He knew it would confuse them long enough for us to see the path the Lord has set before us. What has the Lord set before us? Ansel repeated with a mocking tone. Leonard's eyes tightened and Ansel swallowed nervously. When Lily faced the Wintermaker a century ago, she learned only pieces of the Song of Manitou in a vision from the future. In 1962, our enemies showed up, yet failed because they only had pieces of the song. When the Serpent Star came in 1986, the world did not end. We had a fire handler, the Wintermaker was still trapped in Lake Manitou, the Philosopher's Stone, the Ironwood Scrolls were locked in a cave, yet what was still unknown? Okay, I follow. A sacred shell, Ansel hummed. So what is it? I spent considerable time trying to understand the sacred shell. In recent years, we've studied the Ironwood Scrolls, that chest hidden in Lily's cave. Yes, the chest of scrolls. Our experts have studied them. They are the story of the Wishigan clan and how they journeyed from Atlantic through the stopping places and how they arrived at Lake Manitou. This strange pictograph language is different from any other scrolls belonging to the Anishinaabe people. But it's not the Song of the Manitou, is it? It is a key for a key for a key, Leonard said with the slightest of smiles. You know there is magic embedded into the very rocks of Lake Manitou. You saw your death in the willow tree vision and prepare to one day battle the Wintermaker. To defeat him, you'll need the Philosopher's Stone and the words to command it. Ansel shrugged at the whole future drama condensed simply. You believe the only way to translate it is to find the sacred shell? Leonard nodded. Ben believes the sacred shell is going to be found in the east. If it is discovered, I want you to be ready to help us. Thanks, I think, Ansel said with trepidation. You carry a heavy burden, and I can see the concern on your face. There are things we can control and things we can't. Our enemies do not know the full Song of the Manitou, and until they find the sacred shell, it doesn't really matter where Levi put the Philosopher's Stone or who holds it. I see your point. Ansel felt better about the current issues of the reservation. Leonard patted him on the shoulder. There are no souls trapped in Lake Manitou who know the full Song of the Manitou. For any spirits from the future to know it, the prophecy must be fulfilled, which is why I've come to you about the importance of finding the sacred shell. Before our enemies do. Levi really messed things up for them, didn't he? We must protect the reservation. We must secure the Philosopher's Stone. We must learn what happened to Levi. He paused. You should continue to cast out each demon left here, but we could use your help in unlocking the mystery of the sacred shell. Only with it will we be ready when the time comes. I want you and Ben to be ready to take the next step. Count me in, Leonard, whatever it takes. Very soon, I'm going to reveal a secret to you that will change the Asante Lodge. Ansel whistled playfully. A secret? What do you have up your sleeves, Leonard? I've been watching you since we first met in 1986, and Ben agrees that once this crisis is resolved, we'll need to prepare you. Prepare me for what? To learn a language that hasn't been spoken for thousands of years. He's not talking about the Philosopher's Stone. What did he find out in the Rockies? You've been keeping a secret since 1986? I've only told Ben out of necessity. We agree it's time to show you what we found. But not today? Leonard shook his head. Ansel sighed. How did you keep this all bottled up for a decade? Diligence. Chapter 42. First Day. Old Copper Road, January 5th, 1998. As soon as she stepped off the bus, Cassie could see Grandma Edna looking out the window. It was good to be greeted, and it only made her miss her mother even more. The heat had been on in the bus, but whatever warmth she stored disappeared upon stepping outside. The sky was filled with tiny broken snowflakes that bit her face, and the wind whipped. Any shed tears for her mother would have frozen, so she saved them. Once Cassie stepped through the doorway, she could hear Edna in the kitchen. Cassandra, is that you? Yes, Grandma. We thought they might close school early because of this snow. Has Dad called yet? No calls. I have some fresh cookies out of the oven. Cassie kicked off her boots, set her jacket on the hook, and carried her heavy backpack into the kitchen. Sit, sit, Grandma Edna said in reference to the plate of cookies and glass of milk that were waiting. So, how was your first day at school? About what I expected, Cassie began. Teachers hogged most of the hour introducing the syllabus and material for the second semester. I've got a ton of homework, but none of it seems hard, mostly busy work. And what were your impressions of your classmates? The list of suspects? Well, Grandma said in exasperation. She looked around the kitchen before quietly quieting her voice. What did you think? If I didn't know better, she began, it felt like I was a distraction. It was like that scene in The Shawshank Redemption. I was fresh meat. The girls seemed to hate me, and the guys were way too curious. Did the yearbook pages help you match a name to the face? Cassie nodded. It's a small senior class, so it was pretty easy to figure it out. And what were your impressions? I sat with Austin Hiller during history class, the principal's son. He's really cute, but I was worried he might be... Cassie stopped herself from saying gay. Well, from the frosted tips to his manicured fingernails, the guy was just perfect. Don't fall for a pretty face. Right, Cassie agreed. In journalism, I met Miranda Penny. Oh, the, friend? Grandma Edna could not say the word gay aloud, but Cassie nodded. She was a walking zombie. I don't know if it was depression or drugs, but she was there, but not there. A guilty conscience, perhaps. Apparently, she didn't have an alibi either. She wasn't at the party, but claimed to just be wandering around town. Who's next? I had Nate Marquette in calculus. He's been charged with providing alcohol to minors and for hosting the party. Well, he didn't act like that charge was bothering him. He was measured. He only spoke when spoken to, and even then, he only said the minimal. He had this phony grin the whole time, but I wouldn't want to be alone with him, that's for sure. Have you heard what happened to his family? Cassie nodded. Everybody knows, but nobody talks about it. Did you meet the jealous girlfriend? Madison? Yeah, she seemed properly unpleasant. I sat a row behind her in choir, so her hair didn't give me much of an impression. Jealousy is one of the oldest motivations for murder, Grandma Edna said. I talked to a boy in study hall who thinks a guy named Skeeter had something to do with it. Skeeter? Skeeter Jensen. I think his name's Troy. Jensen. Oh, that makes sense. The whole family has been a bunch of criminals. Hiawatha County's poor white trash. Who accused him? Victor Berg. Well, he would know. He's poor white trash also. Skeeter dropped out of school a few days after Summer vanished, so Victor thinks it's because he knows something. Edna hummed. So now you know why I worry about you with these local hoodlums. Well, these cookies were worth the hassle of moving. Plus, Dad really seems to like his new job with the DNR. She smiled. I don't think you have to worry about my classmates. With all the drama going on in Summer's life, maybe it was as simple as just running away. Cassie finished her milk and picked up her heavy backpack. She didn't have her own theory about running. She didn't believe her own theory about running away, and she certainly didn't want to bring up the portents and omens she'd been experiencing. Well, I should go to my desk and I should go get my desk and homework all situated. Do you need any help making supper? Oh, no. Go take care of your stuff. When your father gets home, we'll have supper. Once Cassie got upstairs, she found a little snowdrift forming at the corner of the sliding glass door that led into the balcony. She pushed it tighter and stuffed a sock into the corner to block any more snow. Looking past her own reflection in the glass, she could see the winds intensifying. And unlike snow in a city, the winds built momentum like waves out in the open country. Once again, she found herself worrying for her father. My trauma manifested, she decided, just like the psychiatrist predicted. She unpacked her new books and organized her desk, but she hadn't even begun an assignment when she saw her father's headlights on Old Copper Road. At supper, she gave her father a recap of her first day at school without bringing any of the teen suspects in the disappearance of Summer Chauvin. Cassie once believed her morbid fixations were attributed to growing up in the birthplace of Edgar Allan Poe, but now she realized she'd gotten it from her grandmother, who watched every mystery show on television each night. After 2 weeks, her father seemed like a man transformed, and despite red cheeks and being out in the cold much of the day, he could not help but grin as he talked about some of the anecdotes of his day. The Raven was right. The move seems to have saved him. After supper, Cassie settled into her normal routine, which meant achieving perfection on all of her homework. Despite the snow and drifts, she felt normal and went to bed feeling confidence about her choice in Minnesota. Whispers pulled her from the edges of sleep. Cassie commanded her body to freeze so she could focus on listening to the unfamiliar noises coming from her room. Outside, the wind still raged. Are you here to help? Cassie held her breath. It wasn't the coarse voice of a raven. While the intrusion in her room terrified her, the voice held no sinister tones. It was a child's voice. Cassie opened her eyes. Bloody teeth and ripping claws faded. Are you? This time, Cassie flinched at the suddenness of the voice and flipped her torso into an upright position. At first, the apparition appeared like frost upon the glass of the sliding door. The curtains had been left open to take measure of the blizzard, which Cassie now regretted. Instead of a vampire scratching at the window, a schoolgirl stood inside the glass of her bedroom floor. What do you want? Cassie managed to vocalize. You're going to help us, right? Cassie didn't know what to ask next. The little girl was not dressed for snow, but instead for rain. Although she appeared as a blonde-haired child, the little details seemed as fluid as if suspended. Help you? I'm so tired, but I can't get out. The old woman said she'd try to find help. We can all see you from the lake. I'm the only one strong enough to come speak with you. Cassie gasped. Danica. Her mother spoke of a nightmare about a bus accident and a drowned girl named Danica. Is your name Danica? The little girl nodded. Cassie thought of the Black Raven and the ghost from Lord Baltimore Hotel. What if my dad wasn't the one who needed help? How am I supposed to help you? Don't leave us here. Help us cross over. Why can't you cross over? The little girl shrugged. The water sticks to us like a spider web. This is as far from the lake as I can get, but now that she's here, she is stirring the waters and making things even worse. Who is making things worse? The apparition pointed to Cassie's dresser and the seated blonde Barbie holding the raven feather. She's crazy. She's so angry that she doesn't want anyone to leave. Even the old woman can't control her. But you can help us. Will you help us? How do I help? Go to the willow, and the old woman can tell you what to do. Now I must go, but don't forget about us. We need you to free us from this trap. The apparition passed through the sliding glass doors, leaving a sheen of frost that evaporated into the air moments later. Chapter 43, Mystery Incorporated, St. John, Minnesota, January 10th, 1998. Cassie studied her uncle for much of the drive. Before the move, he'd been a titan to her, but now she began to notice the little details. She didn't see much of her mother in his stern face, even though his hair had the same ginger roots. Along with being twice the size of her mother, he also seemed tattered along the edges despite being only a few years older. A woman might have convinced him to cut the hair in his ears, but Uncle Brian was single. So do you ever get to investigate crimes, or are you just too busy with managerial work? He raised an eyebrow. I've got too many cooks in the kitchen the way it is. 5 full-time investigators and 25 some deputies who all think they could do the job also. Plus, outside agencies come in depending on the crime. But I get to review the evidence and make independent assessments. I'm a fresh set of eyes. Does that all make sense? It does. I'll also find out what the team needs. To do that, I'll stick my nose into a situation and make judgments. And how long do investigations last? Oh, it comes and goes. If things are quiet, I can get people together to make things more efficient. If things are crazy, I might need to pull in a few deputies to assist a detective. Most times, my staff can handle it, but if a case is too complicated, I can call other agencies for help. Is that what you did with the Summer Chauvin case? There it is. Excuse me? I saw you weaving your way towards that. You know better than Ma, Cass. Nobody in the records department gets inside information. I don't go to dispatch and update them on cases. Stay in your lane, darling. She nodded and didn't argue. He'd called it right, but memories of Danica gave her boldness. I'm really just trying to understand how your investigation department works. How so? Detective Tavares and Bowman work drug investigations. Ray Irvin works death and homicide investigations, and Coleman and Van Zatten investigate theft and robbery. In Summer Chauvin's case, how did you decide who to assign to that case? Brian muttered, fuck, under his breath. Okay, Miss Notre Dame, I see why Dana Eklund is so excited to have you working with him. You're a sharp cookie. Your mother always bragged you up, but I just figured she had that maternal pride thing going on. It was the nicest thing he'd said to her. Without a body, I couldn't give it to Irvin. Since Miss Chauvin disappeared at a high school party, I did let Detective Tavares open an investigation when drug and alcohol paraphernalia was found at the scene. Detective Van Zatten is investigating the missing car belonging to the Chauvin family. Currently, the BCA has the case since it involves a child and potential kidnapping or human trafficking, because the BCA has national resources. Uncle Brian warmed a bit to the question. I'm sure in your Nancy Drew investigation you've caught up on the details that came out in the media. So what exactly do you want to ask me? Nancy Drew was cool. Was that supposed to demean me? Am I going to school with a murderer? Now she watched him squirm. Let me think. I was born in 1948, and in the past 50 years, there have been multiple murder investigations in each of those years. Granted, we're not talking multiple homicides, a night like Chicago or New York, but added up, that's over 100 killers. Alcohol, domestic turmoil, stupidity, and downright villainy have caused my neighbors to step over that thin red line. It's always a surprise, yet it's never surprising. The kids have been interviewed, the parents have been interviewed, and the local drug dealers have been interviewed. If there had been a prime suspect, we would have made an arrest. But I can't tell you because I don't know. I understand, Cassie retreated, knowing it was an earnest explanation. I apologize for prying. The 10-minute drive from her house to St. John didn't allow another opportunity to fire up another conversation. As soon as they stepped through the doors, she went one way and he went another. Down in the records department, it was quiet. Dan Eklund, Charlene Dunn, and Lisa Mix worked bank hours Monday through Friday, so only Delora Sampson and Jessica Lafreniere were scheduled to work today. Delora was a rough-and-tumble single mother of 3, so working extra shifts on the weekends helped make ends meet while her kids visited their father. Jessica Lafreniere was only a few years older than Cassie, and from another world. Although she had the body of a middle linebacker, she had a smaller personality and the voice of a 90-pound pixie. Her computer was decorated with Hello Kitty stickers and figurines. Yet what truly separated them was culture. Jessica had grown up an hour north in Cass Lake on the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe Reservation. "How was your first week at school?" she asked pleasantly. Cassie walked over to her desk. "Strange. I feel like a fish out of water. They look at me like I'm some sort of exotic zoo animal." "Oh, give it time. Soon the horn dogs will be making their moves and the girls will start spreading rumors to push you down the social ladder." Cassie chuckled at Jessica's accurate assessment. "There's a social ladder at Split Rock High School?" "I attended a small school just like yours, Bugonegishig." "And what does that mean?" "He was an Ojibwe chief, so it's like naming a school after a president. Like Cass Lake, most of the kids at Split Rock are going to spend their whole lives close to home, so reputation is about all that matters. You showing up for their senior year messes with their whole existence." "Back in Baltimore, my class had 600 kids in it, so most of the drama was only within friend groups." "Welcome to the Sticks, where everybody knows everybody's business. Most of the kids at Split Rock have known each other since the cradle." "Yeah, I picked up on that," Cassie said before pivoting the conversation. "Do you follow the Summer Chauvin story?" "Yeah. She'll probably turn up this spring." "What do you mean?" "When the snows melt. It sounds like she probably got drunk and drove off a road somewhere. It's not the first time it's happened, and it won't be the last." "You don't think anything foul happened?" "Oh, the media pushes that stuff for headlines. The kids over in Split Rock are growing up in a Disney movie, but who knows? Shit happens all over the place." "That's pretty much my what Sheriff Forsberg said." Cassie cleared her throat. She felt like a tourist. "I should get to work." Cassie settled into her routine. Dan Eklund left her a list of tasks and a promise that he'd be in after lunch to check on her progress. She grabbed the zip drive and went back to the waiting box. Different cases had different types of evidence. Most were paper copies, which meant scanning each page. Other files had bagged evidence, which meant using the digital camera to take a picture. 1962 had the biggest pile of boxes she'd seen yet. Eklund did everything backwards, so the December files had to be scanned first. March had more files than she'd ever seen in Hiawatha County. She rolled over to one of those scanned boxes just to satisfy her curiosity. Of course, the flood. She'd heard of it as a child when they visited for holidays. Her mom explained everything to her father, but Cassie had absorbed many of the stories. She remembered feeling sad that an amusement park had been destroyed by the flood. But now she realized the toll on human life caused by the dam burst. She picked up Ray Kirkpatrick's file and began scanning. He'd been working on the Nicollet Dam when the structure gave way. Chronologically, he'd been one of the first victims. His file only had a few pages to scan. Next, she found Wayne Forrestal's file. Poor Wayne had died of a heart attack, according to the coroner, a day before the Nicollet Dam broke. Cassie found another file in the March 19th divider. Danica Knutson died from drowning. The report described how the bus driver had lost consciousness and drove into the flooded ditch of the Buffalo Slough, and she rolled away from the document when she spotted the picture names James Edward Nielsen and Brian Francis Forsberg. A few deep breaths later, she leaned back over the document to confirm the details. As she read about the two middle school boys who rescued a bus full of kids from drowning, she learned that one of the kids, Danica, had slipped away from the grip of Nielsen and drowned. She was in first grade. She found a coroner's photo of the drowning victim that confirmed the ghost had been Danica Knutson. A chill came over Cassie and froze her in place for several seconds. She slowly pushed back from her workstation. Knutson. She knew the name, but not with the connection to Danica, the ghost girl. She knew it from somewhere else. And with each pounding heartbeat in her chest, she knew somehow it mattered. She stood and went over to the new computer where all the records were kept. While Eklund's personal computer was locked away and password protected, the new computer that held all the historical records and cold cases and thus did not warrant security protocols, especially since Cassie needed to update the system regularly. She frantically fired it up and waited for the system to boot. Finally, she opened the search protocols and typed in the name Knutson. Result 1, drunk and disorderly. Result 2, driving while intoxicated. Both files hit on the same Molly Knutson. One involved an 18-year-old and a married woman named Molly Chauvin. Both Mollys had the same birth date. Cassie gasped when she figured out the connection. Danica and Molly were twin sisters. She turned off the computer and returned to her workstation. Danica asked for my help, but how am I supposed to help a ghost? It's been 26 years. Cassie scanned all the pages for the file on autopilot, which had no answers. Does it mean Summer is truly dead? Is she one of the souls stuck in Lake Manitou? Cassie transferred the file to another box and reached for the next case. Wesley Thorgard, an ice fishing death with no nefarious connections. Chapter 44, The Witch of Endor. Old Copper Road, January 25th, 1998. Cassie waited on a storm that never came. Her first impression of Minnesota had been wrong, and for the rest of the month it remained dry. Sure, it had been frigid, but a short January thaw melted much of what little snow had arrived. Since Lake Manitou remained frozen, she abandoned plans to search for a willow until spring came. No supernatural visitors came over the following weeks. Waking up on another peaceful night of sleep almost came as a disappointment after the initial thrill. So much for staying in bed all day, Cassie thought, as she heard a noise from the kitchen below. She could hear Grandma Edna slamming cupboard doors and making a general ruckus as a passive-aggressive way of getting them to join her for church. She covered her head with a pillow and ignored it until the slamming stopped. Before her mother's death, Sundays were indeed a day of rest, but not for going to church. Cassie had tried church the first few weeks, but didn't realize it'd be a weekly expectation. Outside, a car departed. By the time Cassie got out of bed, the car returned. It was already 10 o'clock, which meant Grandma Edna had dressed, gone to church, and returned before Cassie even woke. For her age, the old farm wife was surprisingly vigorous. Cassie's trip to the bathroom announced to the world that she would be joining them since the sewer pipe rattled the walls whenever water flowed. Downstairs, she saw her dad was already up. He sat in the recliner with his feet up. Since he wasn't a blood relative, he didn't get any guilt trips about church. He'd been raised Episcopalian and hadn't converted to Catholicism when he married Julia, leaving their marriage and daughter in no man's land. "Good morning, Dad." It was good to see him content again. "Good morning. Grandma has cinnamon rolls in the kitchen." Cassie patted her belly and rolled her eyes. "If track doesn't start soon, I'm going to weigh 200 pounds by graduation." "So who are these boys that are crashing our Super Bowl party later today?" her dad asked, setting his newspaper aside. "Well, after a month, they're the only two that aren't complete jerks or creeps. Clay lives just down the road. He helped us unpack. He's autistic, so he can be a little odd about unfamiliar people, but he's a real sweetie. Oh, and don't give him any grief about his green hair." "A punk rocker?" "No, he just really likes plants," Cassie said, raising her eyebrows when her dad snorted. "The other guy is Austin Hiller, the principal's son. He's class president, student council president, NHS president. Basically, he's Fred from Scooby-Doo." "Couldn't pick between the two?" "Oh, knock it off," Cassie said flatly and went into the kitchen to hug and kiss her grandma. The hug deflected comments about church, and after eating a roll, she stayed and helped prepare an assortment of snacks for the big game between the Green Bay Packers and the Denver Broncos. Uncle Brian showed up early in the afternoon with a couple of local buddies, Miles Stewart, who wore a Broncos hat, and Percy Thorgard, who wore a Brett Favre jersey. Although she'd never met them before, she remembered they were the same group of friends that her dad would visit on his annual hunting trip while she and her mom had a girls' weekend. He called and updated She called and updated Austin about the other guests an hour before the game, but he still showed up with Clay as his wingman, right on schedule. With a room full of men, she set up a beanbag chair in front of the couches to watch the game. Clay and Austin sat in kitchen chairs brought into the living room. Surprisingly, it was a close game. In fact, it was an exciting game, and before she reveled in the energy around her. On several occasions, even Uncle Brian hooted and hollered. Cassie wore her Baltimore Ravens sweatshirt, even though the team had gone 6-9-1 that season. When John Elway spun like a top as he dove for the first down, only Clay had no reaction. He retreated to the kitchen a few minutes later, so Cassie got up to retrieve him. "Too loud?" she asked, seeing him standing beside Grandma Edna. He nodded. "Let's go upstairs where it's quiet," she said. "I'm not sure your father would want you upstairs alone with a boy," Grandma Edna said with a pointed look. "I'll be fine, Grandma." Cassie took Clay by the elbow and led him to the stairs in the no man's land between the kitchen and the living room. She'd lost Austin to the game, and he didn't notice as they walked up the stairs. Clay and Austin had come into her life thanks to the administration of Split Rock High School. She needed to find her way around the building the first week, so near the end of each hour they had shown up outside of her door to escort her to the next location. After the second day, she had it figured out, but still enjoyed the odd kid with green hair nervously chatting away. By the second week, the tables turned. His mannerisms made sense when she learned he was autistic, which meant he had absolutely no issues learning, as long as it was a topic that interested him. His major struggle was understanding social situations and how to operate within them. So, in exchange for a second study hall, she agreed to hang out with him in the empty cafeteria where she could study while maintaining conversations with him. "I like your room," he said as he stopped 2 steps in front of the doorway. "I'm still getting used to it. The sliding glass doors are a bit drafty. Apparently, I've got my mom to thank for that modern amenity. I'm really looking forward to being able to read out there when spring rolls around. Do you like to read?" He nodded. "Who's your favorite author?" He shrugged. "I don't read novels. I like to learn about things. I like May Wood's History of Greenhouses, Orangeries, and Conservatories." Of course. Despite being tall and handsome, with a body just starting to fill out muscularly, Clay appeared as disinterested in her as Austin. Austin, on the other hand, had immediately caught her eye. She and Clay were listening to the random mix on her 6-disc CD player when Austin came jogging up the stairs. "You missed the end of the game," he greeted, flopping onto her bed. He spent the next few minutes giving her a recap. With a dimpled smile, perfect hair, and piercing green eyes, Austin reminded her of J.C. Chazaz from NSYNC. It helped that Clay trusted him. From what she learned, Austin had been kind to him since their elementary days. So Austin sat down on her floor and leaned up against her bed, Cassie sat down on her floor and leaned up against her bed while Clay awkwardly sat in the chair in the corner. Once the details of the game were dispersed, Austin grew distracted by her bedroom and began to inspect anything within reach. Even though he meant nothing by it, he took a framed picture of her mother and asked, "Is this your mother?" He knew the story already, but it put her off her game, and a wave of agitation came over her. She got up and walked over to the sliding glass door. She heard Austin mutter to himself as he set the picture back down. "You okay?" "Do you guys believe in ghosts?" she asked. "Yup," Clay answered so quickly that Cassie and Austin both smirked at him. "Do you?" Austin asked her. "I'm just trying to understand ghosts, I guess. They say there are 6 billion people on Earth right now, and a generation from now, those 6 billion will all be dead. Yet ghosts are super rare. All over the world, every culture not only believes in ghosts, but can also tell stories of ghosts. What causes that 1% of 1% of 1% to get stuck while the others just float away? Maybe it's how they died," Austin theorized. "Many ghost stories I know seem to center around, sudden deaths. Like my mom. I went back to the place where she died and didn't feel anything. Why couldn't she be a ghost and stay with me?" "Maybe it's not sudden deaths. Maybe it's intentional deaths. Have you heard about the story of the mothers who wander the woods around Lake Manitou looking for their lost children?" There's 12 of them, Clay added to Austin's response. She lightly chuckled before replying, then why aren't there millions of ghosts lingering around after World War II? I mean, you think about it, it would have been an epidemic of haunting. I just wish I understood how it works. So, do you believe in God and heaven? Austin asked. I do, Clay answered with total sincerity. I think the best word for me is agnostic, Cassie answered. What's that mean? Clay asked with concern. I'm uncertain. I've experienced enough to believe in some things, but I just don't know if I buy the Christian view 100%. Folks like you go to heaven or hell 5 seconds after you die. There are even stories of ghosts in the Bible. There are? Austin asked. Yeah, I found one on the internet that describes how King Saul asked a witch to call on the spirit of his buddy Samuel for some advice. How does that work? Austin hummed, looking curious. So, is this because your mom, or have you actually seen a ghost? Like I said, I went to the place where my mom died and felt nothing, but there's this creepy old hotel that seems to be ghost central. It makes me wonder if a place is what draws ghosts. Like Doc Jones Bridge, Austin offered. Clay grew wide-eyed. What do you mean? Just down the road. The old metal bridge. It's called Doc Jones Bridge because this Split Rock doctor hung himself during the Great Depression, and since then it's been haunted. Clay walked away from the window, nervously clutching at his hands. Is all this ghost talk bothering you, Clay? Cassie asked. I think I just want to go home now. It's getting late. Austin sighed and gave Cassie a wishful shrug. I suppose. Let's get you home, Clay boy. Thanks for coming, she said, and hugged each of them. Clay remained tense while Austin reciprocated. Maybe we could get together sometime and work on homework? What homework? Clay asked. Cassie winced, realizing she'd only intended the invitation for Austin. Or watch a movie. Both boys nodded in agreement. For a moment, there was a flicker of interest from Austin. She didn't follow the boys downstairs. Instead, she went over to pick up the picture of her mother. Any advice, Mom? Clay called out from the bottom of the stairs. See you later, alligator. She carried the picture to the sliding glass doors and held it while watched the boys leave. With Doc Jones Bridge to the east, Bleeding Rock to the north, and Lake Manitou just over the hill to the west, she suddenly felt as if the house was on some sort of spiritual island. No wonder my mother left for Baltimore. Chapter 45, One Day at a Time. Nisike Island, February 7th, 1998. When Ansel returned from his morning run, Lacey's car was parked in front of the house. Having exerted himself to the breaking point, he felt a strange calmness as he stepped inside the house without any energy to deal with her. He was greeted by the sound of running as Willow came around the corner in a full sprint to smash into his legs like a mini linebacker. Hey, Ansel, she said, still gripping him. Ansel put a hand to her head. No school today? We don't go to school on Saturday. Oh yeah, it's Saturday, isn't it? I'm helping Emily make cookies. Well, Emily's a great cook, so pay attention to what she's doing. What's your favorite cookie? Oh, I like M&M cookies, so be sure to make some of those. Willow let go of his leg and skipped back into the kitchen. Ansel kicked off his running shoes and his running jacket and stepped further into the house. He could hear Lacey talking, but when he stepped into the living room, he found her sitting on the couch opposite the Wilhelm, who rose immediately, saying, Let me fetch you some coffee. Ansel remained standing. Thanks for coming over. Of course. How have you been? I haven't been sleeping well, she offered. Well, I shouldn't have invited you over for coffee. Oh, it's not that. Weird dreams? She nodded. How bad? Not bad at all. For the most part, they're nice dreams. They're Northfield dreams. Ansel's heart sunk a bit. And here I thought they might be Levi dreams. Luckily, none of those. They're usually stupid stuff like birthday parties or attending church or parent-teacher conferences. Pleasant stuff. But it's always inevitable that as the dream ends, I find myself looking for Carrie or Paul. I wake up in a panic. I suppose that's my fault? It's no one's fault. You asked, and I told you. A moment later, Wilhelm returned, but with Willow, who balanced a cup of coffee on a platter. Here's your coffee, Ansel, she said. Why, thank you very much, he said, and he picked it up from her. Hold on 1 second, miss. He reached into his wallet only to remember he only wore his jogging pants. Wilhelm, could you make sure you tip my waitress 15% or with peppermint sticks? I want a peppermint stick, she told Wilhelm. I'll let you two have your space, Wilhelm suggested, smiling at Willow. Let's go collect your tip. Although playing the part of a grandfather in his cardigan and reading glasses, he was as adept at steering children as dispatching a grown man. Let's go into the reading room, Ansel said in the silence. The single wall of books went from floor to ceiling, where a glass ceiling sloped away to form another wall of the narrow room. 2 facing love seats offered a space to curl up with one of 10,000 books. I need your help making sense of some new details about the prophecy, he said once they sat down. So small talk is over, huh? Is there something else needed to say? No, never mind, Ansel. He recoiled, trying to understand how he'd offended her based on her tone. Is there something you need to say first? No, get on with business. So he did. The situation at the reservation is getting complicated. With the Thunderface family and the state park, she reviewed. Yeah, and other things as well. So that's why I wanted to get your impression of what's going on. Oh, I see. I'm too crazy to listen when it comes time to talk about Julia Campbell or Summer Chavine, but now that they're both dead, suddenly folks are ready to talk. No one knows that Summer's dead. Oh, please, those boys killed her, took her car, and hit her body, just like Mrs. Crane dreamt about. Victor Berg and Austin Hiller had alibis. Summer's car wasn't found at the Brainerd junkyard, and her body wasn't found in the culvert by Nimrod. You should know that just because you have Northfield dreams that Paul and Carrie aren't real. David's real. My whole point is that while Mrs. Crane did dream about the deaths of the people who resembled Julia and Summer, she didn't get the game plan for the future. Our world is different from those dreams, isn't it? Lacey nodded in defeat. Quit fighting with her. Why are you doing this? Ansel began again. There seems to be a new threat from a new enemy, one other than the Order of Eos. Lacey set her cup down and sat up. What do you mean? The Thunderface family has powerful support, and from what the guys have learned, this entity is using the Thunderface family as pawns to get access to the property, so they can search for the Philosopher's Stone. Why'd you say that? I told you already. When Levi returns, he's going to awaken the stone so he can battle the Wintermaker. You know what happens to you in this fight. You know what happens to him, too. How's that hairline doing these days? Ansel pulled off the red bandana he wore when jogging to reveal a healthy head of hair. It's still here. His death was still years away from what he could tell. He and Lacey had both seen visions of the future when they visited the Willow Tree back in 1986. He'd seen his death, and he'd seen Levi McPherson, still very much alive. The mysterious figure that had been under the tree with them asked them to protect the ancient tree, but never to use it lest the enemy destroy the delicate path she'd set them on. Both obeyed the request. He cleared his throat. So what do these people want? Lacey's mouth cracked a crooked smile as she pleasantly stated, Death, destruction, anarchy. Ansel scoffed. Why do you say that? I told you already. When? When I warned you about Summer. You didn't say anything about Vendetta when you spoke about Summer. I didn't know they were called Vendetta, but they've been here the whole time. Summer sensed it. You know, if I'm wrong about Summer Chavine's murder, do you know what I think happened? I think she killed herself. Why would she do that? Northfield dreams. Just like I dream of David and my imaginary kids living in an imaginary house in Northfield, I think that poor girl was suffering with dreams crossing over into her reality. When Levi took control of the prophecy, a future had already happened, a future where Eos or Vendetta wins. We all had different destinies, and Summer's destiny has changed the most. If Leonard was the definition of control and diligence, Lacey was impulse and exuberance. Even so, her insight impressed Ansel. How? Why? The enemy of my enemy is my friend? Well, not with Vendita. Yeah, Eos is our enemy, and we've been trying to bring their and has been trying to bring their prophecies to reality, but Vendita wants to stop us all. Lily sensed it too. The face of death, she and Wally both worried about the fellow in the white suit and red Thunderbird and where they wanted to take humanity in the future. I bet Vendita had something to do with the flood of 1962. I think Levi stopped something bad from happening, and just like we didn't vanish from our enemy, I think the real Vendita is out there fighting stuff too. Figuring stuff out too. And what's the connection between Vendita and Summer? Lacey rolled her eyes. I'm not part of the Asani Lodge, so my thoughts don't matter. The guys will figure it all out. Instead of nurturing Summer, Clay, and Cassie, we ignored them. They were kids. Not anymore. And now Summer's gone. I'm worried that something bad is going to happen to Cassie and Clay. Perhaps we've made a mistake in sheltering them, Ansel admitted. Leonard says the real fight won't be for another generation. He says it'll happen when Halley's Comet returns in 2061. You'll be 90 years old, Ansel. Is that your age in the Willow Vision? No, Ansel muttered. I suppose that's why Leonard didn't come right out and show me. Show you what? Ansel deflated. He's got some missing piece of the puzzle, but he worries what will happen if he shows it to me. There's going to be a battle, and if it'll come when I'm 40, if I'm lucky. Ansel reevaluated. You know, if all this stuff is so important, why doesn't God just give me a clear answer? In seeing my death, am I supposed to avoid it? Tell me, Lacey, do I go left or right? She reached out at her hand and took his hand. It's good that you and Leonard are making plans for the next generation, but there are things happening right now here at Lake Manitou that will matter too. If I die in my 40s, then Willow will be 25 when the battle takes place. I should be spending more time with Willow, shouldn't I? Lacey hesitated. Let's do something fun today and leave all this other stuff behind. Tomorrow, we can talk about the future.